Mr. Speaker, the International Climate Change Conference in Paris is coming up later this month. Earlier in his term, the Premier broke the law by not meeting the government's climate change commitments to reach Kyoto targets by 2012. And in the years since the Premier announced he was going to break the law in 2011, he and his NDP government have failed to produce an updated climate change plan. Will the Premier table today his plan to address climate change, or does he even have a current plan at all?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before I answer the question, I do want to acknowledge the presence of Jerry Diaz and the students here for the forum that's going to be happening on sexual orientation and diversity with the Canadian Centre for Gender and Sexual Diversity. And we welcome them to the legislature here, and we want them to know that we passed the anti-bully legislation. Similar to what we've done in that regard to make a more inclusive Manitoba, we also want a climate change program in this province. We reduced climate change emissions by 37% over the last decade, Mr. Speaker. We have seen an increase in climate change emissions. We are working on a renewed plan. It started with the International Institute for Sustainable Development doing wide-ranging consultations around the community. We see opportunities to have greener buildings. I just was at an announcement this morning for a housing co-op, Mr. Speaker, where they're going to have a very green building there. They're going to reduce their emissions, which will reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It'll also reduce operating costs. And we look for further opportunities in the transportation sector, the agricultural sector, and of course we're building hydroelectricity, which is displacing megatons of greenhouse gas emissions to the west of us and to the south of us, and we know the opposition wouldn't do any exports of clean hydroelectricity, which would make climate change worse.
Order, please.
For the whole
First Minister's time on this question has elapsed.
Mr. Speaker, climate change is the most important environmental problem of our day. Yet this Premier and his NDP government have been delinquent both in meeting their legislated commitments and subsequently in providing a plan to address this problem and reduce greenhouse gases. Why has the Premier been so slow to address what has been called the most important environmental problem of our time?
We have actually been a leader. We're protecting Pimachwinakee, east side southern boreal forest of Manitoba, 33,000 square kilometers. We're doing it in partnership with the 5 First Nations that live on the east side in terms of the land use planning. We're protecting the cultural diversity of those communities and their languages and their history. We're protecting the forest. We're protecting the wetlands. And we've put a moratorium on peat mining in Manitoba, Mr. Speaker. Those are all actions that have been taken by Manitoba well ahead of any other jurisdiction in this country, Mr. Speaker. And we're looking at additional things we can do. Chittick Lake, Mr. Speaker, the woodland bison is being protected in Manitoba. The polar bear protection park in the north around the Churchill area is being protected. And we're doing land settlements with the Saïse Dene, which will protect the land, and full partnerships with Indigenous people when we do planning. All of these things are in aid of a new approach towards reconciliation, a recognition of our responsibilities on climate change. And I have to say, the member opposite was a member of a federal government which completely missed their climate change plan objectives. We look forward to a cooperative approach on this going forward, where provinces, municipalities, and community stakeholders.
Please. The Honourable First Minister's time on this question has elapsed.
Mr. Speaker, we are already at an annual average atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration of 400 parts per million. This level is 50 parts per million above what is believed to be a safe level. It is only 40 to 50 parts per million away from a level that is expected to be associated with a 2 degrees Celsius rise in global temperature, a very critical threshold. Manitoba will not only have to reduce our greenhouse gases, but Manitoba will have to also adapt to much warmer global temperatures.
What will the Liberals do?
What are the top 3 measures the Premier will take to ensure Manitoba can adapt to high global temperatures?
Speaker, and I can only point out one very significant one to get the discussion started. We're building flood protection for the people of the Assiniboine Valley, Lake Manitoba, and Lake St. Martin. Those are climate change mitigation measures which will stop those communities from being flooded. The members opposite, including the member from River Heights, have voted against those measures in our infrastructure budget. We're leading the country on infrastructure build, including protecting communities from very serious climate change events. Another very significant thing we're doing, The members opposite have always mused about privatizing hydro. We're seeing hydro being privatized in Ontario. That will only make climate change worse when we privatize that. Higher rates, lower opportunities for people to address climate change by owning their own Crown Corporation, Mr. Speaker. That's the second thing we're doing that no member on the opposite side of the House is supporting at this stage of the game, Mr. Speaker. And thirdly, when it comes to climate change, Mr. Speaker, we're protecting Lake Winnipeg from eutrophication. We're protecting the waters of the province of Manitoba, and we will continue to vigorously pursue that. And we look for the members opposite to support the measures we've put in the House that they previously voted against, Mr. Speaker.